everyone. We're going to do our club business after our speaker, just in case he might not want to hang around and listen to us.
It's
Talk
cold.
about all our money problems and things like that. So, but just one announcement to let you know, of course, Jennifer accepted our nomination for vice president. And she's going to be your president next year. And of course, her responsibilities are making sure you've got a good lesson plan for each meeting of the 10 we have. She also has a lot of other tasks that she does. So, and she's already, I am just blown away with how good she's doing already. So you guys come up and give her a thank you for all the efforts that she puts in. But I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer now, and she's going to announce our speaker we've got tonight.
All right. Hi, everybody. Tonight we have Peter Helfrich. He is currently the president of the Metro Atlanta Beekeepers Association. He is going to be talking about some native bees today. He also chairs the City of Decatur's Bee City USA, where he talks about bees in city schools, help organize Decatur's annual National Pollinator Week observance. I do highly recommend you make it down there. I went the last couple of years, lots of plant sales, things like that, where you get to learn about a few things. And he was honored, I just want to make sure I got this, as Beekeepers Association Beekeeper of the Year for 2024. So welcome, Peter.
All right, well, thank you for having me. I was here, I think, 2 years ago, so thank you for having me back. We're going to talk about some native bees tonight, and don't worry, we're going to talk plenty about honeybees as well. It's very difficult to talk about any type of bee without talking about honeybees, and of course that's going to be your area of expertise, so there's going to be a lot of crossover that we can talk about. As Jane mentioned, my name is Peter Helfrich, and I'm president down at Metro Atlanta's club. I also do a lot of work with the Georgia Beekeepers Association, so if any of you are members of GBA and get the newsletter, I put that together for you every month and help get you all the news with what's going on with GBA.
Turn it up a little bit because you can't even go back.
And as Jenny mentioned, I also am very involved with Bee City USA down in Decatur. If you're not familiar with the program, Bee City USA is it's a national program run by the Xerces Society out in Oregon, and cities and other municipalities can become affiliates, and I chair the local committee in Decatur, and a big part of my job, it's a volunteer position, is to make sure that the city continues to meet the criteria for having that designation. So we have to do a lot of educational programming, talks in the schools, at community events, things like that. And we put on a big festival during Pollinator Week in June, and a wide variety of other educational events and workshops throughout the year. So obviously, you guys meet every month to get together and talk about bees, and bees that you're talking about are going to be honeybees, western honeybees, and you're all keeping bees like this in your backyard, and so you know quite a lot about them already, and I hope that you know, if you don't already know, that these honeybees are not native to the United States. They're not native to North America. They were brought here in the late 1500s by European settlers, European colonists, the English, the Dutch, the French, the Spanish, etc. And once they arrived, like the colonists themselves, very quickly spread across the continent. So the honeybee today, of course, incredibly important to our agricultural system. Our agricultural system, the way we farm today, is really built around and on the backs of honeybees. They're incredibly important for the pollination services they provide, and of course for the honey crop that is produced as a result. But they are just one of 20,000 kinds of bees worldwide. So a huge number of bees in the world, 20,000 different species. Here in North America, approximately around 4,000, a little more than 4,000 different species in North America. And right here in our state of Georgia, many people are very surprised to know that there are some 500 different species of bees. They come in all different sizes, they come in different shapes, they come in different colors. We got bees that are red, we got green, silver and blue. Of course, honeybees and many others are sort of tan and brown, and we've even got the classic yellow and black ones. 70% of bees worldwide live in the ground, so the vast majority of all bees are going to be ground-dwelling bees, and the overwhelming majority of bees, 97% of all those 20,000 species in the world, are going to be solitary bees. So bees that live a very different lifestyle than our honeybees. So they're solitary bees as opposed to being social bees. And these bees, these different kinds of bees that we're going to talk about, they live at different times of year. We're used to here in Georgia, our honeybees, of course it's been incredibly cold the last 10 days or so, but normally during the winter when the temperature's above 45, 50 degrees, our bees are out flying and they're looking for whatever they can find. Not so with other bees, not so with the native bees. You're only going to find them beginning in the spring and through the fall. You're not going to see native bees overwintering the way our honeybees do. So tonight, I thought that I would talk about, I'd focus in on 3 types of bees. These are going to be bees that, even though it being so cold, it's hard to believe, but spring will be here pretty quick. Just a couple more weeks, we'll be getting into first little bit of warm up that we always get, and we'll know spring is on its way. So we're going to talk about some bees that you'll be able to see in the spring. And I thought I'd start with the bumblebees here. I think I've got another, there's a little picture that somebody sent me online. I have another diagram that I found online. We don't really, as beekeepers, as honeybee keepers, a lot of times we don't know a lot about other types of bees. We don't really spend a lot of time thinking about them. And as a result, we don't know a lot about how they live and how they're similar to or different from the honeybees that we know a lot about. So with bumblebees, they're actually very closely related to honeybees taxonomically. They're in the same family. They're in the family Apidae, the true bees. They have many similarities that stem from this close taxonomical connection. I'll talk about a few of those. Bumblebees live in colonies. So they are social bees. They live in colonies like our honeybees. Colonies are nowhere near as large, however. A typical bumblebee colony usually has a couple hundred individuals in it. Of course, our honeybee colonies can be 40,000, 60,000 bees. Bumblebees have 3 castes, just like honeybees. They've got a queen, and they've got workers, and they've got males or drones. They are what are called eusocial bees, like honeybees. That means they have reproductive division of labor, where there are 2 types of females. There's a queen who's a female, and there are workers that are female. The workers, even though they're females, they don't reproduce. The queen is the one that reproduces. So this reproduction, division of labor. They have cooperative brood care. They're all working together to raise the young. and they have overlapping generations. So again, very similar to our honeybees. They're cavity nesters, although the majority of bumblebees are going to nest in the ground. They generally will nest in an unused rodent cavity or other cavity space left vacant underground. Some species of bumblebees will nest above ground. You may see them move into a birdhouse. You may see them occasionally make their home in dense vegetation, like large clumps of ornamental grasses and things like that. But for the most part, many species of bumblebees nest underground. They do build their nests with wax. Interestingly, only the queen produces the wax, though, and she's the one who builds the cells that will then contain the brood. They do, of course, like all bees, collect pollen and nectar. And again, they are closely related taxonomically with honeybees, so they do have pollen collecting special adaptations, physiological adaptations on their hind legs. So bumblebees do have corbicula, the pollen baskets, like honeybees do. In fact, it's a great way to be able to tell what kind of bee you're looking at, because honeybees have corbicula and collect pollen in these dense pellets on the hind legs. So do bumblebees. They're the only two types of bees that you're going to observe here in Georgia that have that special adaptation and pack the pollen tightly into pellets on their hind legs like that. And bumblebees actually do produce small amounts of honey. They have these little wax cups that they build inside the nest, and they'll produce very minute amounts of honey. And we'll talk about why they don't produce large amounts in just a minute. And some species of bumblebees are used in agriculture, like honeybees are. So bumblebees have the ability to do what's called buzz pollination or sonication. They can vibrate their flight muscles to shake dense, sticky pollen from flowers that honeybees will often ignore and not bother with because the pollen's too difficult to get, especially plants like our tomato crop. So tomatoes are typically grown in hothouses, and certain bumblebee species can be brought in, released into these enormous greenhouses where the tomatoes are grown in order to perform pollination services for tomato crops. So honeybees. One really big difference between honeybee colonies and bumblebee colonies is honeybees are what we call, what we term perennially social, whereas bumblebees are what we call annually social. So you may be familiar with the terms perennial and annual if you're working in your garden. If you're planting flowers, you may be planting perennials. Those are going to be the plants that come back year after year. You may want to add some color to your garden, and you'll plant some annuals. And those are going to be the plants that they only grow and they bloom the one year, and then if you want to have them again the following year, you've got to go get some more and plant them again. Same thing is true with the bumblebee colony. Unlike our honeybees, where the queen produces brood, they store food, they live through the winter, the colony keeps the queen warm, she produces small amounts of brood throughout the winter, and then when spring comes, she begins to ramp up her laying, and the colony swells in size and continues. Bumblebees don't work like that at all. As winter comes, the entire colony will die off. Only queens will survive over the winter. So very different very different life cycle when we're looking at the two types of bees at the colony level. Very different. So for bumblebees, this shows sort of the life cycle of the colony. Right now we're in winter, so out there under the leaf litter, perhaps burrowed a little ways underground, we've got bumblebee queens. And they are in a state right now called diapause. It's sort of like a suspended animation, a hibernative state beneath the leaf litter. They're waiting for spring to come. When spring comes, they will wake up. They will forage for food. They will scout for a nest location, again, usually underground. Once the queen settles on an appropriate nest location, she will begin producing wax cups to build the nest. She will continue to forage for pollen and nectar, and she will lay the first eggs that will be the start of the new bumblebee colony. So because the queen has to do all of this work herself, those first bumblebee workers that she produces, they tend to be very small. They don't get a lot of nutrition because she's out there doing all this work herself, collecting all the food. So the first workers that she produces tend to be very small. But once she begins to build a workforce and she has some workers to do some of the heavy lifting, she will remain at the nest site, let the workers do the foraging. She'll just continue to build the wax cups and lay the eggs, and the resulting brood, as the colony grows, tend to be larger. So unlike our honeybees, bumblebees can be variable in terms of their size. At different times of year, the same species of bumblebee can be very different in terms of their physical size and appearance. And it has to do with how large the colony is, how robust they are at being able to forage and bring in food to feed the developing brood. So as the year progresses, the colony will grow in late summer or fall. The bumblebee queen will begin to produce next year's queens. They will produce similarly to the way honeybees can control, the honeybee queen can control whether she lays fertilized eggs to become workers and unfertilized eggs to become males. The bumblebee queen can do that exact same thing. She produces in the fall, she produces males that can mate with the queens that she produces. Those bumblebee queens will mate in the fall, and that's so that the queens can then overwinter under the leaf litter or underground. They're mated, they're all ready to go for when spring comes. And here's a picture that I was able to get last summer of a bumblebee queen. Last fall, bumblebee queen, and she is mating with a bumblebee male here. Unlike the way it typically is, the males here are much smaller than the queen. And you can see she's got one of her legs where she's actually kind of locked onto him, holding him onto her. So they will mate in the fall, and then the colony, the bumblebee colony, will die as the weather turns cold, and only the queens will overwinter. So you may have seen different campaigns online, on social media about leaving your leaves, and you may have been curious, what's that all about? That's part of it. The leaving the leaves can help insects like bumblebees, like bumblebee queens, insects that have to overwinter. Leaving a thick layer of leaves in parts of your yard can give them a place where they have a warm place to overwinter. So leaving the leaves is something that can have a beneficial effect for bumblebees and other types of insects. So there are 17 different species of bumblebees that we have here in Georgia. I typically see about 4 in the metro Atlanta area. In my backyard in Decatur, I typically will see the American bumblebee, the common eastern bumblebee, the brown-belted bumblebee, and this one is the 2-spotted bumblebee. Now I know up here you may even have a couple that we don't have down in the metro area. I know up in Kathy Bourne, some of you may know Kathy, up in Lake Hartwell, she definitely has photos of some bumblebees that we don't see in metro Atlanta. All right, so the next bee that we're going to talk about is another spring bee, the mason bee. Gets its name because most species of mason bees will build their nests using mud. So they'll work with mud much in the way that a mason builds with mortar and bricks. Looking at the mason bees taxonomically, a little bit different. When you get down to the family level, they're in an entirely different family than our honeybees. They're in the family called Megachilidae. And Megachilidae translated means large jaws. And you'll see in some of the photos that mason bees do tend to have very large mandibles. They use those mandibles for collecting the mud that they build their nests with. So we have 19 different species of mason bees that call Georgia home. Not all of them are native, so some of them are introduced species, much like our honeybees. We'll talk about some differences here because unlike the bumblebees that shared a lot of similarities, mason bees are completely different. They're really doing their own thing. For starters, they're solitary bees, so they live alone. No queens. All females will reproduce. They're a very early spring bee, so at least down in Metro Atlanta, we tend to see mason bees late February, early March. 1 generation per year. When they emerge depends a little bit on the specific species, but once they emerge, they're only active for about 4 weeks, and that's it. You won't see them again until the following year. They are small cavity nesters, so they do like to nest in pre-existing cavities. However, they are going to be in things like cracks, crevices, pre-existing holes. They like holes that are left by other animals, other insects, holes left by woodpeckers, holes left in wood by beetles, things like that. They tend to build with mud, although some species will build with plant pulp. They are very closely related to leaf-cutting bees. Leaf cutters are another type of bee that is in the same family, Megachilidae. So they are very closely related to leaf cutters, and they will, some species will use plant pulp. And one big difference with bees in this family, the masons and others, is how they carry their pollen. So we talked a little bit about how bumblebees and honeybees have special adaptations to their hind legs, the corbicula, the pollen baskets, and they have special hairs called the pollen press, where they can pack the pollen very tightly onto those hind legs. Mason bees, leaf-cutting bees, resin bees, other bees in the family Megachilidae, they don't have those adaptations to the legs. Instead, they will carry their pollen on the ventral side, the underside of their abdomen. They have special hairs there called the scopa. Scopa is an Italian word that means broom, and they collect the pollen on the underside of the abdomen. And I've got some photos that I can show you of that. It's very easy to see, it's very easy to recognize, even if the bee is in flight, you can usually see that coating of pollen on the underside that'll tip you off that you're looking at a mason bee versus another type of bee. So just visually, in the spring, you might see mason bees working ornamental flowers like this cherry here. So I've got mason bee on cherry, and of course a honeybee here. And they're going to look fairly similar. They're about the same size, and many mason bees are sort of a brownish color. But other types of mason bees, like this green one here, is which is a native mason bee. This is Osmia georgica, the Georgian mason bee. Come in colors, so it has usually a greenish metallic color underneath its tan hair. The blue orchard mason bee, of course, it has a bright blue color. And here's a great picture of a mason bee, and here's where you can see the pollen collected on the scopa, on the underside of the abdomen. Very, very clear that you can see all the pollen there. I think we got some other pictures showing that. As opposed to the bumblebee up here and the honeybee here with the pollen collected on the hind legs. Yeah, so here's another picture from my backyard of a mason bee entering a house, and you can see that pollen very clearly. Makes mason bees very easy to recognize. So as I mentioned, they may nest in cracks and crevices. These are a couple of photos that were sent to me by someone in the springtime. And you, as beekeepers, oftentimes we're the first people that folks will reach out to when they see bees and they don't know what's going on with bees. These were photos that were sent to me by a woman who thought she had honeybees living in this rock wall. So in the springtime, you may get calls about mason bees. I know I certainly do. But mason bees, of course, they're solitary bees. There's not going to be anywhere near the number of bees like there would be if there were honeybees involved. They'll live in a variety of different types of houses as well, human-made houses. So they'll live in the bee hotel style, bamboo kind of tubes. They'll live in various kinds of paper tubes that are sold for mason bees. They will, as I said, they'll find holes. This is the side of my house where there are some old nail holes in some of the brick and masonry from when there used to be awnings over the windows. There used to be screws holding the awnings on here. The red mud, red Georgia clay there definitely tells you that mason bees have moved in. And they'll live in these wooden houses that are very easy to construct. I make a lot of these. I do a workshop program with kids down in Decatur where we make some of these out of untreated 2x4s, just with some drilled holes, very simple mason bee house. But inevitably, whenever I show these houses to people or have them at a tabling event for the public, people always see the wood and they see the drilled holes and they start to get it in their heads that mason bees are carpenter bees. So just to be clear, mason bees are not carpenter bees. They can't drill their own holes. They live in small cavities that they find. They don't bore holes. They don't drill holes. They need to find the cavities that are pre-existing. And I see a lot of times in the springtime, I'm online on a lot of different beekeeping groups on Facebook and whatnot, and folks will, I see it every year, someone will post a picture of some mason bees mating. So we got some mason bees mating here. Again, the male is the smaller, also identifiable by this white mustache on its face. Here's another picture, but I'll always see beekeepers posting on pages related to beekeeping these pictures of mason bees mating, and they'll say, I thought bees mated in flight. Yeah, well, only honeybees do that. So difference between mason bees and honeybees and bumblebees. So bumblebees, they don't mate in flight either. So mason bees, they're going to typically be mating on the ground, oftentimes right outside of the nest site. In the spring, females emerge and the males are waiting for them and immediately mate with them upon the female's emergence. So they live in cracks and crevices. They typically build with mud. I'm going to give you a little peek inside to show you what it is they're doing in these holes that they live in. We've got a female mason bee here. You can see her in the hole. This is a cross-section view, just like we have observation hives for our honeybees. I've got an observation hive for my mason bees, and it lets me look in and see inside the hole at how they build their nest. So they will typically line the inside of the hole or the crack, the crevice, with mud. And they'll begin a process of building a series of rooms or galleries. Inside each gallery, the yellow that you see here is pollen that single female bee has collected. She'll collect pollen and nectar, she'll mix it together and store it. And on top of that pollen ball, she'll lay a single egg. Then she'll build a wall with mud, and then she'll repeat the process. She'll collect pollen and nectar, lay a single egg, build a wall. And she'll work her way forward until she reaches the end of the hole. Just pretend that didn't happen. So she'll work her way forward until she reaches the front, and then she'll cap it with mud, and then she'll move on to another hole, another crack, another crevice that she finds, and she'll repeat the process. And a typical female mason bee, she may produce about 30 offspring each year. That's all she does. She will do that until she dies. She will just work and work and work for the 3 or 4 weeks that she lives in the springtime. Here's a good up-close picture that I found on the internet showing the pollen ball and the eggs on top. So all of the food that the developing larvae is going to have available to it is right there. There aren't any nurse bees, there's nobody else coming to feed you, anything like that. They're on their own. So in terms of a life cycle, the mason bee life cycle actually takes an entire year to complete. the female will do the mass provisioning and the egg laying. Just like with honeybees, the larvae will develop from the egg. It'll consume the food and it'll grow in size. Just like honeybees, then it'll spin a cocoon and begin its pupation phase. But there, suddenly the process diverges because these mason bees in the pupal state, they'll remain that way until next year. So for the entire year, they're sleeping inside those tubes or cracks or holes, wherever the mason bee has made the nest. So mason bees, just one generation per year. Different species out at different times, but usually only for about 4 to 8 weeks in the springtime are when our various species of mason bees are out and active. I got one more good picture here of this whole process. So this is the very back of the hole, and up here is the very front. These are the caps at the ends of the holes. And the mason bees, just like honeybees, the mason bee female, she can control whether she's going to lay a male or a female. And because she has that ability, she puts all the females in the back. So all the eggs that are laid in the back are all females. The eggs laid in the front, those are going to be the males. She does that for a couple of reasons. The first reason is the males are going to emerge first. They're going to emerge a day or two early. They're going to be ready to mate with the females when the females follow and emerge in the springtime. The other reason why mason bees do this is because the females are the guarantee of the next generation. The further back in the hole they are, the more protected they are during that incredibly long pupal phase. When you're sleeping for a whole year, a lot of things can go wrong. There's a lot of different predators that want to get in there and get at those developing larvae, all that protein-rich larval nutrition. Different kinds of wasps want to, all kinds of parasitic wasps that have special adaptations that allow them to drill into the nests. We got skunks, possums, other mammals that have tongues that are specially adapted for getting in there. Woodpeckers definitely love to get in at larvae. She also does something really interesting here at the front. If you look, this very first cell behind the cap, it's empty. So mason bees tend to leave the first cell behind the capping empty. It's a dummy cell. And that's because there are all sorts of parasitic wasps that have these very long, scary-looking ovipositors, egg layers. And they can drill in through the mud in order to try to lay their eggs on developing larvae. And by leaving this first spot open, she offers more protection for the larvae that are further in. So some pretty cool nesting habits that mason bees exhibit. Okay, so the next kind of bee that we're going to talk about is the mining bee. Mining bee is sort of a generic term. It is a generic term for a wide variety of different types of bees that live in the ground. But specifically, the type of mining bees that we're going to talk about are the Andrena genus. There's 89 different species of these bees that call Georgia home. Unlike the other bees that we've been talking about tonight, like the bumblebees, you can readily learn to identify and recognize a variety of different kinds of bumblebees. And you can readily learn to recognize a variety of mason bees. They're a little tougher, but but you can learn to recognize mason bees. These mining bees are much more difficult. Some of the differences between species are incredibly minute. Some of the species differ by the veins in the wings, or a small little notch in the eyes. And a lot of times, in order to be able to recognize different species of mining bees, you need a sample and be looking at them under a microscope. So we tend to talk about them generically as mining bees, as a big group. So 89 species here in Georgia. You'll see them usually in the early spring. A lot of differences, like the mason bee is very different from honeybees. Solitary bee, most are solitary, live alone, or sometimes they practice a little bit of semi-social behaviors where sometimes maybe two females will share the same hole, but for the most part they're solitary bees. No queens, all females reproduce. Early spring, one generation per year, so when they emerge in the spring, they'll be active for a few weeks, and then you won't see them again until the following year. Ground nesting. And we talked about how the mason bees have that scopa on the underside of the abdomen. Mining bees, they don't have corbicula, they don't have pollen baskets, but they do have special pollen collecting hairs on their legs. So essentially they have just really hairy hind legs for collecting pollen. So the first sign of mining bees, I get tons of calls and emails about this every year in Decatur, is when these little mounds of earth start to pop up in the early spring. Can be as early as late February, early March, into April. We have so many different species. They emerge at different times all throughout the spring, right on into April and May. These little eruptions of dirt, our Georgia red clay, and in the center, a hole that's about the same diameter as a pencil. It's bee-sized. It's a bee-sized hole. And here you go. Here's a bee coming out of the hole. A lot of people will frequently mistake them for anthills. Obviously, they look sort of like anthills, but obviously ants don't have this enormous hole in the center. And even though they're solitary bees, oftentimes mining bees will nest together in these large groups. These large groups are called an aggregate, and they'll nest together like this because that particular area has soil conditions that are appropriate for them. They nest in the ground. They will tend to make their nests sometimes very deep into the ground, so they need soil that's conducive for making nests. So oftentimes you'll see all of these little eruptions of dirt in an area. It might be your front yard. This is actually outside Decatur High School in downtown Decatur. And one of the many projects that I've done with the Bee City group there is to produce these signs that now we will put around town when people call and say, hey, I've got these mining bees. So I'll go around and put these signs out so that people will know what they are. And I'm going to do it again. And know that mining bees are harmless and can be safely observed. Here's another aggregate site in a local city park. This is from March of last year. And I think I've got some video. Oh, here. First, we've got a little diagram, what they do underground, how they live. Instead of constructing those little rooms, those little galleries, they make these little offshoots of a central tunnel. And it's in these little offshoots that they do much the same thing. The female mining bee will collect pollen and nectar. She'll provision each room. She'll lay a single egg. The egg will hatch. Larva will consume the food, spin a cocoon, begin to pupate. Will pupate underground.
Do you have a picture that compares the size of those bees? I've had those sorts of holes in my yard, and the flying insects are significantly larger. So do you have?
So I got some video here.
Okay.
Different species, different sizes, but they tend to be about the same size. So some species a little smaller than honeybees. Yeah, let's see. Here we go. So hopefully you can see that the ground is kind of alive with bees buzzing about, and you'll see activity like this around these aggregates. Here's a closer up view. Here you can maybe see the size a little better. Yeah, so around these aggregates, when the emergence happens, these bees that are buzzing around here are mostly males. So just like honeybees, males can't sting. They're buzzing about, waiting for females to emerge so that they can hopefully mate with them. So as beekeepers, one of the things, the most important thing to remember about mining bees is, if you look at the date on here, April 20th, that's when these aggregates were really going in Decatur. It was Earth Day. I was on my way to Earth Day putting out these signs. But it's right about the same time that we go into swarm season. So as beekeepers, you'll often get a call or an email from somebody saying, there's a swarm of bees. And you'll say, well, where are they? And they'll say, well, they're all over the ground. And you'll say, oh, it's my lucky day. I don't have to climb a ladder. I don't have to get in a tree. And you'll grab all your stuff and throw it in the back of your car. And you'll turn up and you'll say, well, show me where they are. And they're like, right over here in the grass. And they're going to be mining bees. I get that call probably 4 or 5 times a year down in Decatur, because I sort of have become known as the person to contact with the city about questions about bees. The general public, they just see a large number of bees, they're going to call it a swarm. So in the springtime, definitely, especially if anybody talks about them being on the ground, get more information. Honeybee swarm is always going to be that big ball of bees, not a whole bunch of bees all over the place like the mining bees. So here again, the scope on the hind legs, not packed tightly the way the honeybees or the bumblebees do. And of course, just because they live in the ground, they're not yellow jackets. Many people assume anything living in the ground that is going to be a yellow jacket. And again, mining bees, spring, early spring, no yellow jacket colonies active at that time of year. Yeah, it's another question and email I get all the time. Are these yellow jackets? It's like, no, they're mining bees. Okay, so we've been talking about a variety of native bees today. You may have heard in the news, many kinds of native bees are in trouble. About half of all of them are in some form of decline. 25% of all our bumblebees face significant decline. I have to keep changing this slide because more and more bees are being added to the endangered species list. Quicker and quicker, it seems. You probably remember a few years ago, the rusty-patched bumblebee was in the news quite a bit when it was the first be in the continental lower 48 states of the United States to be added to the endangered species list. Since then, it has unfortunately been joined by Franklin's bumblebee, which was added last year, even though no one has seen Franklin's bumblebee since 2003, which is reflective of how long the bureaucratic process takes to get a species added to the endangered species list. No one's seen this bee since 2003, and yet it's only been added. It's very probably extinct at this point. This year, Suckley's cuckoo bumblebee is moving forward and will likely be added this year. And unfortunately, the American bumblebee is also now in talks. It's been put forth and is beginning the process of being added. This is one that I still see quite frequently down in Metro Atlanta, in the Decatur area. I don't know about up here where you are, but in the last 20 years, its numbers have declined significantly. It was once one of the most common bumblebees in the United States, but is now found only in 10 states. Its range has fully shrunk by 90%, and will likely be a candidate for endangered species list very soon. All right, so if any of you, like I, spend time on social media, in bee sites, you may have seen a lot of things about native bees, native pollinators, and honeybees. And if you read a lot about bees, you may have seen a lot in the news over the last couple of years about, are we saving the wrong bees? Well, I'm going to tell you a little bit about where this comes from and how native bees and honeybees are interacting